The ground still holds the scream. The air is heavy with heat. A dry season wind sweeps across the scrubland, lifting dust into a yellow haze that clings to the horizon. In the distance, shapes move, low, steady, deliberate. Their tails sway like whips, heads dipping as they stalk through waist-high grass. Closer to the waterhole, a band of early humans huddles. They are Homo erectus, long-limbed, dark-skinned, muscles taut from a lifetime of running and fighting. Their spears are simple, fire-hardened wood, but their eyes are sharp. They know the sound of movement in the grass. And this is not the wind. From the reeds, a zebra bolts. The herd scatters in panic, hooves pounding like war drums. And then the true hunters break from cover. Two giant saber-toothed cats, Meganterion, each the size of a lion but heavier in the shoulders, with canines as long as a human hand. The cats are not here for zebra today. Their eyes are locked on the humans. The humans freeze for a heartbeat. The leader, a tall male with a jagged scar down his forearm, raises his spear and shouts. It's a guttural, chest-deep sound, meant as much for his own courage as for the others. Children and older members are already scrambling toward the cover of a rocky outcrop 50 paces away. The cats close the distance with terrifying speed. One veers toward the fleeing group. The other lunges at the leader. Spears jab. One glances off thick fur and muscle. The cat's paw smashes into the leader's chest, knocking him backward onto the baked earth. The sound of bone cracking cuts through the air. On the edge of the scene, a vulture circles lower, sensing what's to come. The smell of fear, blood, and trampled grass mixes in the hot wind. Across the waterhole, a second drama unfolds. Antelope driven into the open by a pack of Dinophilis, another big cat of the era. The cats bring down one animal, fangs sinking deep into its throat. The antelope's legs kick once, twice, then are still. Here in the Pleistocene, predator and prey fall in equal measure, and sometimes humans are the prey. The leader struggles to his knees, one arm hanging limp. He calls out, a sound between a command and a plea. Two young hunters rush in, one distracting the cat while the other drives a spear deep into its flank. The cat snarls, releases its grip, and bounds away into the grass, bleeding heavily. The other predator, thwarted by a wall of raised spears around the women and children, melts back toward the cover of the reeds. Silence falls except for the panting of the humans and the distant, satisfied crunch of bone from the feeding Dinophilis. The ground is stained dark where the leader fell. What no one here knows is that the marks the cat's fangs left in the leader's humerus will survive for hundreds of thousands of years, fossilizing in the very soil under their feet. They will become mute testimony to a battle fought in the raw violence of prehistory. Proof that in the age before walls and weapons of metal, we were never just hunters. And somewhere, even now, in a museum drawer or excavation trench, those wounds are still there, carrying the scream of this day across time. But first, before we go further, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel, but only if you find value in what I do here. Uncovering the dark side of history they never taught us in school. These are the stories hidden under centuries of silence and soil. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I would love to connect with you, my friends from all over the world, who join me on this journey through the past. Now, let us go back.
The land these humans call home is not the Africa we know today. This is the Pleistocene, an age where the earth breathes heat and dust, then chills to bone-shattering cold in the turn of a season. The African Rift Valley stretches out like a scar, its jagged escarpments and open plains broken only by thorn scrub and the glint of waterholes. These are not safe havens, they are traps. The people here are Homo erectus, one of our most enduring ancestors. They are not primitive in mind, only in tools. They walk upright, stride long and tireless, their bodies shaped for endurance hunting, but their world is ruled by predators that can overpower them in seconds. Archaeologists have pieced together their story from scattered bones, stone tools, and, most hauntingly, from fossils where tooth marks cut clean through ancient bone. In sites like Sali in Kenya, large mammal bones show parallel gouges that match the spacing of big cat canines. At Grandolina in Spain, human bones have been found with similar puncture marks, a reminder that the hunter's skeleton could end up in the predator's stomach. At the time of our story, the land swarmed with carnivores whose names echo like warnings. Megantyrion, a saber-toothed cat with shorter canines than Smilodon but built for ambush. Dinofelis, a cat specialized for forest edge hunting, often found near waterholes. Lions, but larger and more muscular than those alive today. Packs of giant hyenas, Pachycracuta brevirostris, bone crushers with jaws so strong they could splinter a human femur in one bite. These predators didn't just compete with Homo erectus for game. They competed for territory, and for the right to control the waterholes, the arteries of life in the dry season. To approach water was to step into an invisible crosshair. The Homo erectus way of life was shaped by risk. They moved in bands of 20 to 40, small enough to travel light, large enough to defend against most threats. The men and women hunted together when they could, targeting mid-sized antelope, zebra, and young buffalo. Their spears were fire-hardened and thrown by hand, no bows, no atlatls. They used sharp-edged flakes of stone, often obsidian or basalt, to butcher meat and scrape hides. Fire, when they could keep it, was both a weapon and a shield. The flicker of flames could hold predators at bay, but embers were precious, carried from camp to camp. Children were the most vulnerable. Fossil sites in South Africa, like Swartkrans, have yielded the skulls of young hominins with punctures that match big cat canines. Some show healing, meaning the child survived the first attack, but many do not. This was an age of unstable climate. Wet years would turn the rift into a green Eden, rivers swollen, herds moving freely. But dry years, like the one in our story, forced all life toward fewer and fewer water sources. Prey animals bunched tightly at the remaining pools, and predators followed. For humans, this meant constant movement, shadowing the herds yet keeping a wary distance from the cats and hyenas that were doing the same. When the rains failed, tension rose like heat over the plains. Bands would steal kills from each other, risk confrontations over waterholes, and sometimes fight outright. The fossil record speaks of such encounters: projectile points embedded in bones, blunt force fractures that match stone club impacts, and tooth marks cutting through human ribs, vertebrae, and long bones. Paleoanthropologists studying fossilized remains have identified the telltale signs of predator attack. A cat's canines leave two deep, rounded punctures on opposite sides of the bone, often on the skull or the upper arm. Hyenas leave jagged, splintered edges and spiral fractures where they've twisted and cracked the bone to reach marrow. At the site of Olduvai Gorge, Tanzania, researchers found a human tibia with deep scoring along its length, marks consistent with a lion gnawing at the flesh. In Spain's Grandolina, the partial skeleton of a young Homo antecessor showed cut marks from stone tools and carnivore tooth marks, suggesting scavenging after death. Each of these is more than a data point. They are the scars of an ecosystem where humans were simply one more piece of meat in the chain. Most predator encounters end quickly: an ambush, a kill, and the predators vanish into the grass. But the battle in our story left more than just bodies. It left wounds in bone that would endure for hundreds of thousands of years, hardening into stone. And these weren't just marks of death, they were marks of defiance. Some of the bones found in similar contexts show healing around the edges, evidence that the victim lived long enough for bone to begin repairing. It tells us that sometimes, humans fought off the predator and carried the injured to safety. This is why this attack matters. It is not only about violence, it is about resilience, about a moment when our ancestors stood against an apex predator and refused to vanish. And in doing so, they carved their story into the fossil record. The sun is slipping toward the western ridge, its light turning the grass into a sea of gold and shadow. The band of Homo erectus has been here all afternoon, cutting meat from a zebra they brought down at midday. They've eaten little themselves. Most of the meat is to be carried back to the main camp, but the smell has been drifting far on the wind. Somewhere, hidden in the grass and the broken thorn scrub, other hunters have been listening. A rustle. Then silence. Then again, a faint swish of grass against fur. One of the younger hunters stiffens, nostrils flaring. The leader sees it too. He rises slowly, scanning the line of the waterhole. He knows this is not a grazing herd. This is stealth. A reedbuck explodes from the far bank, dashing into the open. Behind it, a meganterian bursts from cover. The cat ignores the deer. Its eyes are fixed on the humans. The first charge. It is 40 meters away when it begins the charge, a silent, low rush that builds into a thunderous bound. Another cat appears from the left, cutting off escape toward the ridge. The humans drop what they're carrying and grip their spears. The leader shouts, the sound harsh and sudden. The women and younger hunters pivot, hurting the children behind a loose wall of bodies. It is not a perfect defense, there are gaps, but it buys seconds. The first cat hits the wall like a hammer. A spear point catches its shoulder, glancing off the thick muscle. The force jolts the attacker sideways, but not enough to stop it. One paw lashes out, claws raking across a young hunter's thigh. He screams and falls back, blood spilling into the dust. The second cat circles wide, looking for a gap. It is patient, this is the hallmark of an ambush predator. It is waiting for the human's line to break. The lock and the wound. The leader moves forward to meet the first cat head-on. His spear is held low, point aimed for the chest. The cat feints left, then lunges straight. The impact drives the spear deep into the animal's side, but its momentum carries it into him. They hit the ground in a tangle, the cat's jaws closing on his upper arm. The sound is wet and sharp, canines meeting bone. Fossil records show such puncture marks precisely in this location on ancient humeri, the rounded holes often flanked by hairline fractures from the force of the bite. In life, this means blinding pain. In death, it means the mark will remain for millennia. The leader shouts again, this time more ragged. His left arm hangs useless, blood pulsing from deep wounds. The turning point. A young woman darts in, driving her spear into the cat's exposed flank. The predator snarls and whirls toward her, releasing the leader. She backpedals, heart hammering, knowing one wrong step means her end. The second cat chooses this moment to strike. It rushes from the left, straight toward the group shielding the children. Spears jab, but one is too slow. The cat's paw clips a young boy, sending him sprawling. His mother screams, a sound that echoes across the waterhole and sends a flock of wading birds into the air. Two hunters break formation to retrieve the boy. The gap they leave is all the second cat needs. It pushes through, jaws snapping, until a thrown spear, hurled with desperate force, strikes it in the neck. The point does not kill it, but the shock and pain are enough. It retreats, spitting blood, and vanishes into the grass. The first cat, wounded in two places and bleeding heavily, stumbles back. It glares at the humans, ears flat, tail lashing, before limping toward the cover of the reeds. The stillness after. For a long moment, no one moves. The only sound is the rasp of breathing, the drip of blood from wounds into the dust, and the distant cough of a leopard announcing itself from somewhere in the hills. The leader cradles his ruined arm. The flesh is torn to the bone, muscle fibers hanging in strips. Later, if he survives, this injury will leave the same deep puncture marks that modern paleoanthropologists find in fossil collections, the kind that can be measured, mapped, and matched perfectly to the bite radius of a saber-toothed cat. The zebra carcass is gone, claimed by hyenas in the chaos. Meat is lost. Blood is lost. But the group is still here. The wounded are supported as they move away from the waterhole, not toward their main camp but to a temporary shelter in a rocky cleft half a kilometer away. The smell of death now hangs over the place they stood. They know the cats may return. The band moves in silence, save for the occasional grunt from the leader as the pain in his arm spikes with each step. The two hunters flanking him keep glancing over their shoulders, scanning the grass for the low, fluid shape of a stalking cat. The air is heavy with the metallic tang of blood, not just from the leader's wound, but from the young hunter's torn thigh and the shallow gashes on the boy who was knocked down. Every scent and sound could draw predators. Above them, vultures ride the thermals, spiraling lower. They know a kill site when they see one. The zebra carcass is now a feeding frenzy. Giant hyenas with shoulders like small bears muscle in, cracking bones in their jaws, while jackals and marabou storks dart in at the edges to steal scraps. The cats that fled may already be watching from the shadows, their wounds stinging but their instincts still sharp. The survivors head for a narrow cleft in the nearby escarpment, a place where the rock walls rise steep enough to block a predator's charge. Fires are kindled with smoldering sticks carried from their last camp. The smell of smoke begins to push back the scent of blood. In the Pleistocene, fire is not just warmth, it is a living wall, the single most powerful deterrent they possess against the night's hunters. They set the wounded down on hides. Water is fetched from a seep in the rock, not clean, but cooler and less exposed than the main waterhole. The women begin to mash fibrous plants into a pulp, using them as a crude poultice to slow the bleeding. The leader clenches his jaw as they press the mixture into the deep puncture wounds of his upper arm. Each mark is the diameter of a megantereon's canine, round, deep, and perfectly spaced for a bite that can shear through bone. Later, long after his death, this arm will be buried in sediment and mineralized. Thousands of years in the future, when the rock is split open, archaeologists will measure these very holes and match them to the fossil skull of a saber-tooth. They will know, without ever seeing this night, that the wound was not fatal. The edges will show the faint smoothing that comes when bone tries to heal. The loss of the zebra meat is more than hunger, it is a blow to the group's survival strategy. Without that kill, they will need to hunt again sooner, and hunting in the dry season means facing the same dangers all over. This is why predator attacks like this have such weight in the archaeological record. They are not just moments of violence, they ripple forward, altering movement patterns, resource allocation, even group size. Sometimes the ripples are smaller. Sometimes they change the fate of the band entirely. The young hunter with the thigh wound may heal if infection does not set in. But if he cannot keep up with the group's pace in the coming days, they may be forced to leave him behind, a decision recorded not in words but in the absence of his bones in future campsites. In prehistoric life, survival often came down to whether the wounded could still walk. Modern science has trained itself to read these ancient ripples. Sites like Alerch-Saley, Oldaway Gorge, and Grand Olina preserve evidence of such moments in eerie detail. Archaeologists find hominin bones gnawed by predators, sometimes with cut marks from stone tools overlaying the tooth marks. This layering tells a story: the person died, was scavenged by animals, and then their remaining flesh was removed by other humans, perhaps to reclaim the body for ritual, perhaps simply to reuse the bones. The aftermath of predator attacks is also visible in the distribution of artifacts. Tools left behind in panic, piles of butchered meat abandoned half-prepared, or camps suddenly shifted to more defensible terrain all paint the same picture: disruption, displacement, and adaptation. Back in the rocky cleft, the firelight throws flickering shapes against the stone. The group stays close together, their bodies forming a living barricade around the most vulnerable: the children, the elderly, and the wounded. Outside, the sounds of the night begin: the long, rising call of hyenas, the coughing grunt of a leopard, the faint pad of paws in the dust. The leader sits near the entrance, his injured arm bound tightly in hide. He cannot hold a spear tonight, but he can still watch, still warn. His eyes are fixed on the dark just beyond the fire's glow. Every so often, the grass moves, and he hears a sound that tightens his grip on the crude stone knife in his good hand. The cats may not come again tonight. But the knowledge that they could is enough to keep everyone awake until the first pale light of dawn. Predator attacks like this shape the very trajectory of human evolution. Constant exposure to such danger favored not just strength, but cooperation, planning, and the ability to anticipate threats. This is why fossilized wounds are not just macabre curiosities, they are data points in the story of how we became what we are. In some cases, bones show partial healing, proving that early humans could nurse the injured long enough for recovery. This implies a degree of social support, food sharing, protection, care, that set us apart from many other species. In others, the wounds are mortal, the bones found far from any shelter, scattered by scavengers. These tell of moments when the balance tipped the other way, when the predator won. For the survivors of this attack, the memory will be carried in story. Perhaps told around the fire for years, each retelling sharpening the details until the day becomes legend. But for the world beyond their own lifetimes, the only story that will survive is the one written in bone. And those bones, lying somewhere beneath the dust, will keep their silence for hundreds of millennia until they are unearthed, cleaned, measured, and matched to a predator's skull. Only then will their scream be heard again. The wind has erased the footprints, but the ground has kept the truth. What happened on that dry season evening will never be spoken by the survivors. Their voices are long gone, yet it is still here, written in the language of mineralized bone. The earth is patient, and in its patience, it remembers. In the centuries after the attack, dust will cover the site again and again. Floods will press sediment into the cracks between bones. Over millennia, calcium will replace living tissue, hardening tragedy into geology. The zebra's skeleton, splintered by hyena jaws, will vanish into the soil. But one arm bone, punctured clean through by the canines of a meganterian, will remain intact enough to tell a story, if you know how to read it. And when a human hand, hundreds of thousands of years later, brushes that soil away with the soft hairs of an excavation brush, the moment will open again. Paleoanthropologists are detectives of deep time. They read bones the way historians read letters. Every mark, every fracture, every trace of healing is a sentence in a story almost lost. A rounded puncture, identical on opposite sides of a humerus, matches the arc of a predator's bite radius. A spiral fracture in a femur speaks of twisting under immense pressure, the hallmark of hyenas extracting marrow. Parallel scoring on a tibia could be the work of a lion's incisors, stripping flesh before the larger canines come down. In the fossil record, violence is precise. It is not a blur of motion or emotion, it is measurement and pattern. And it's these patterns that allow scientists to say with certainty, yes, a predator's teeth closed here, yes, this was an ambush, not a scavenging, yes, the victim lived long enough for the bone to begin healing. The humerus of our leader from that night will show signs of such healing, faint remodeling along the puncture edges, evidence that the bone cells worked overtime to knit themselves together. That means someone fed him, defended him, and moved at his pace for weeks afterward. In a world with no hospitals, that is the mark of cooperation, and the earliest seeds of what we call humanity. But the fossil record is not filled with survivors. Far more often, the bones tell stories of the predator's victory. A child's skull from Swartkrans cave in South Africa carries two deep, rounded holes on its crown, the exact spacing of a leopard's lower canines. The edges show no healing. That child was carried into the branches and eaten. At Grandolina in Spain, the remains of a young Homo antecessor bear both stone tool cut marks and carnivore tooth marks. Here, the line between hunter and hunted blurs further. The body was scavenged by animals after death, but only after its own kind stripped some flesh first. Such evidence strips away romantic notions of prehistory. The truth is harsher. We were not at the top of the food chain. We lived in a constant, shifting balance, sometimes killing, sometimes being killed, always at risk of becoming a meal. These marks are not unique to Africa. In Ice Age Europe, Neanderthal bones in cave sites show damage from cave lions and giant hyenas. In Asia, Homo erectus fossils from Java and Zucudian bear the scratches and punctures of big cats and possibly even crocodiles. In the Americas, early Homo sapiens remains show interactions with dire wolves and short-faced bears, predators that could outrun and overpower a human with ease. It was universal. No matter the continent, early humans lived in predator-dense ecosystems. Every trip to fetch water, every hunt, every migration route was a gamble between hunger and being hunted. What these fossilized wounds reveal is not only the danger, but the adaptation. To survive repeated encounters with predators, our ancestors had to change their behavior in ways that were permanent. Cooperation over isolation. One human alone is easy prey. A band with spears, stones, and coordinated movement can drive off even the most determined cat. Care for the injured. Without carrying and feeding those who could not hunt, no wounded survivor would ever leave a fossilized healed wound behind. Knowledge transmission. Stories of attacks, of places to avoid, of strategies that worked, were shared around the fire and passed to the next generation. Over time, this oral mapping of danger zones became part of group identity. In this way, violence, fossilized in bone, became a teacher. Every wound was a lesson in how to fight smarter, how to watch the wind, how to read the behavior of prey and predator alike. When we look at the smooth, white bones in a museum display case, it is easy to forget they were once red with blood, warm with life, and clutched in the grip of terror. Each fossilized wound is a reminder that survival was never guaranteed, it was earned, again and again, at staggering cost. And here's the deeper truth: without this constant pressure from predators, we would not be who we are. Our teamwork, our planning, our ability to read danger in a single snapped twig, all of it was sharpened on the whetstone of being hunted. The predators that left their marks on our bones also carved the instincts that allowed us to outlast them. In their jaws, we became human. But the bones do more than remind us of what we overcame. They also damn us with the knowledge of how fragile we once were. We stand now at the top of the food chain, armed with weapons that can erase entire species, yet it was not so long ago that the balance of power was reversed. One wrong step at a waterhole could end a life. One moment of inattention could feed a predator for a week. The marks in those fossilized bones are not just history, they are a mirror. They show us the animal we once were, the prey we used to be. And they whisper that our place at the top was never guaranteed. We took it, and we could lose it. If you think this was brutal, wait until you hear the story of the prehistoric massacre where the killers weren't predators, but other humans, a slaughter so thorough that every single skeleton tells the same bloody truth. Subscribe now, because these stories are not myths, they are written in the bones beneath our feet, and the earth is still keeping count.
What you just watched wasn't just history. It was a voice that refused to be forgotten. And there are so many more waiting to be heard. So if you felt something today, if the past reached out and touched you, then don't let it fade. Subscribe to Unique History Alive. And walk with us, one buried truth at a time. Because history isn't dead. It's just been waiting for someone like you.